back to the Anarchy Garage, and today I'm going to be carrying on with the E-Type Revenge build. So this car here is a Series 3 E-Type 2+2, so would have had a V12 stuck in the front of it. But part of the idea with this is we are putting in an F-Type engine, so it's having a 5-litre V8 supercharged and all the suspension running gear put into this very rusty shell. This whole idea and concept started off with a design we found from Yassi Design, and that has spawned the whole big wide arches for this car and all of the modern suspension concept and idea. So today I'm going to be carrying on with the floor on this side of the Jaguar. So I've managed to get in the passenger side all in with a new chassis rail, but now I'm going to be putting in the driver side as well. So I've got all my measurements from this side to transverse over. So let's get the floor into the car. Change of attack here. So I was measuring the floor up to go into here. Now the big thing is, and I have mentioned this earlier, the thing with these sills is the sills actually go either side of the floor panel. So I was looking at it and where it was going to go, and do you know what? It was easier to cut the sill out first and then put the floor in. But what I will probably do is actually put the sill in first, to be honest. So getting the sill in first then means that the floor joins onto it, which is exactly how I did the other side. I was hoping to actually leave that in place to just check all my measurements a bit more thoroughly as I went through, but it just makes more sense to actually rip the sill off at this point. It's amazing though, this is the better sill out of the two, and seeing all of the rust and stuff here actually from a different angle, it was really bad. This car was literally probably on the brink, if not past it a little bit. But new sill will go in here now, so I'll measure the inner sill up, tack it in place. Then I will tidy the floor panel up and put the floor panel in front and rear. And then last of all, I'll probably put the outer sill on as well with the reinforcement. But it's easier to just cut it out the big section. I've got my reinforcement bars here to stop the shell from actually twisting. So the more structure I can put in it now, the better the car will be. So that's the inner sill tacked in place. There was a lot more meat on this side than the other, so I haven't had to build up as much before I could actually pop the sill in. So I've been able to actually get some proper welds on this as well, so it is secure in there. And I've measured and measured and measured with this just to make sure it is exactly where it needs to be. So I've got points of measure from here, 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 and all the way around the B pillar as well. What I'm going to do now though is look at getting the rear floor panel in and start to tie that into the back of the car, and then link it into the sill as well. Again, I can check my measurements as I'm going, so make sure that all lines up with this as well. So the rear part of the floor is now all welded in and tacked in place, and I've checked the measurements and so far it's absolutely bang on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my front section of flooring before I put any more strength and welds into it. What I want to do though is cut out the bottom half of this bulkhead here and also the remaining chassis rail that is attached to it. That way then I can line everything up, check it's in place, string it out and get my remaining chassis rail in the front. that's the front section of floor now tacked in place as well. So the plan is, I'm going to get my other chassis rail, put that in place, tack that in as well, and then I'm going to have a massive binge on measuring. So what I'm going to do is cut the piece of metal for the chassis rail now to 1.8, put it from the front over the back, and there's a little bit of overhang into the kind of rear axle area. That's intentional, so when I do cut that rear section out to put the axle in, that overhang will help link the axle into all of the structure, including the chassis rails as well. So cut that piece, let's get it tacked in. So there we go, that is going to be the natural stop for today's progress on the E-Type Revenge, and that is because I've managed to get all of my floor in on the driver's side. My inner sill is now in place as well, and also the chassis rail is tacked in place as well. You may have seen I made a little plate down the front which has actually joined the inner chassis rail onto the gearbox tunnel. That is a really important measurement there, and when I was actually trimming off the lower part of the chassis rail there, I noticed it actually had a little bit of a tweak, possibly with a forklift truck when it's been getting moved around. So it was easiest to cut it off flat, copy the measurements from the other side, and I've got the chassis rail exactly at the right height. The next thing though, which I'm not going to film, is actually the full measurement check. This car is going to get re-measured and rechecked from every single angle before I go for the hammer blast on the welding on this side, and also finish off the fabrication on the other side. The reason for that is we want this car to be absolutely millimetre perfect, and this stage it's at the moment, everything appears correct, but before we really get hammering the welds in, this is the last kind of chance to check it's perfect. So time to get stuck in with some measuring, but that's too boring for you to watch. So that is it for this episode of the Anarchy Garage, and thank you for watching the build progress of the E-Type Revenge. See you next time.